I want to start with a pretty shocking update we've received in the wake of Donald Trump being declared horrifically the winner of last night's presidential election. I talked about this. I delivered the news to all of you in the middle of the night last night. I'll go through again and then add new thoughts to sort of my general takeaways about the election as this segment goes on and as the days go on. But before getting into this big news that's breaking right now, it is looking like Trump will sweep the swing states, pushing him well past 300 electoral votes. As of when I'm recording this, he's sitting at 292 electoral votes, Harris at 224. And what you'll notice is the turnout wasn't what it was in 2020. And as you dive into these numbers, and we'll have thousands of people in terms of pundits and analysts breaking down all these different reasons and the trends and how this group voted that group and what led to this result. And we'll have time for that. But in a general sense, you have millions of people who incorrectly chose to vote for Donald Trump. And then you have a lot of people who chose not to go out and vote. Harris is not going to get the 81 million votes. Trump's not going to get the 81 million votes that Biden received. There wasn't the groundswell of support for the pro-democratic candidate that we needed, as is becoming very clear. And I want to keep telling you all, you did, I did, we did all we could. So feel peaceful about that. There's a lot we can feel turmoil about. But you can feel at peace that we left it all out on the field. I've been hearing from many of you overnight as I've tried to sleep but mainly failed. And of course, we're all going to question ourselves. What did we do wrong? We gave all we could. And sometimes things outside of our control lead to really unfortunate outcomes. But we are in this together. And for that, I'm grateful. And I'm grateful even on the video last night that I uploaded that is just as bad as it gets. Probably the worst news I'm ever going to have to explain to y'all. And all of you handled it with such grace. And right now what we're seeing, just for context in this space, is hundreds of thousands of people across the channels are unsubscribing to shows like mine and all of my counterparts in this space. And when I told that to you, that led many of you to say, I'm standing by your side. We're in this together. And the response is not going to be to completely demotivate and detach. And again, for that, I'm grateful. Before getting into more just election-related discussions, here's the news that I'm referring to. Trump's going to get away with it. And I, every day, will seek to bring you hope when I have it. And I do have things that I explained to you in the middle of the night, last night, or early this morning. Things within the hope category to talk about. And there are things we can do and steps we can take. This, though, not hopeful. This is Trump getting away with crimes.
Yeah, Chris, it's not a surprise that these cases can't go forward when Donald Trump takes office. What's interesting here is that the DOJ is moving to end them even before he takes office, citing the long-standing DOJ policy that sitting presidents can't be prosecuted. And there was some thought that maybe Special Counsel Jack Smith was going to sprint through the finish line, was going to work up until the last day, force Trump to fire him, wait till a new attorney general was appointed. But that does not appear to be the thinking inside the department. The thinking is that these cases can't go forward. There's no reasonable prospect of getting to trial within the 3 months before Donald Trump takes office. These cases are mired in legal issues that would be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court had Donald Trump lost the election. So now that he's won the election, DOJ officials are thinking that, look, there's just no room to move in these cases. And so the sensible thing to do is to figure out a way to wind them down. And it may stem from Donald Trump's lawyers filing some kind of motion or making a request saying, in light of the DOJ policy, you need to drop these cases. Now, there are a few wrinkles here, one of which is that the classified documents case includes 2 other defendants who are not subject to that policy. And it's been dismissed, obviously, but that dismissal has been appealed. And the DOJ considers that ruling to be very bad law that it would like to be overturned. So that appeal may continue in some form. But the reality is that Donald Trump is not going to be a part of these cases. And what this means, I mean, we knew this, right? But just coming to grips with what this means intellectually is that Donald Trump is not likely to be held accountable on these very serious federal criminal charges that many people believe were worse than what Richard Nixon did or was accused of doing in Watergate. Now, there's no guarantee that Donald Trump would have been convicted at trial, but as Joyce Vance, our legal commentator, said to me this morning, what's not going to happen is he's not going to face a jury of his peers who would evaluate the evidence and render a verdict. It's going to be lost to history whether a jury would have found him guilty of these very serious.
Yeah, so it is an absolute crying shame that Donald Trump will not be held accountable, especially as it pertains to the democracy cases. Now, the Fulton County case hasn't indicated it's going to wind down, but this is a big reason Trump wanted to be president. He knew there were so many mechanisms by which he could insulate himself from accountability. And with the federal cases, they're gone. And this is why Josiah, who I covered the election with last night, says a lot. Merrick Garland failed. The DOJ failed. Because even if you're a Trump supporter, couldn't we agree that the election interference trial should have gone to trial, or that case should have gone to trial before an election? But they dragged their feet because they're so afraid of being accused of the thing that they were already accused of even after dragging their feet, which was political bias, even though no president should be allowed to get away with what Trump is getting away with. He committed the greatest crime a president can against our democracy, which is trying to uproot it to keep himself in power. And the American people are rewarding him with more power after that. And some of that's because people like it. Some of it, I have to believe, is because people are misinformed. People were convinced that Harris was to blame for the very real pain that was either long-standing or exacerbated or caused by the pandemic era. We've seen globally, one of the warning signs, so we talked about with Josiah last night, was that it's an uphill climb for Harris because globally we're seeing this rejection of incumbents post-pandemic, because there's all this pain that was going to be really hard for any leaders to deal with given that global crisis. And it's easier and simpler for citizens worldwide to blame the person in power or the party in power instead of contending with what is a really nuanced story, especially in the United States, where by all the metrics we could judge such a thing, we've seen a really effective handling of our economy in this recovery, an effective handling of crime and decreasing it rapidly post its pandemic era spike. But that's a much more complicated, data-driven, nuanced story, and a lot of our collective electoral decisions are not made based on nuance and fact and data. They're about feelings. And I want to encourage people again, let's just take a breath and a second and not immediately point fingers at one another within our own movement here. I'm seeing the rage be directed at one another. We were correct, and we stay correct today, wishing that we could have won, horrified that we lost. But we shouldn't immediately abandon one another because of this result. Before discussing more on that, I do think I need to play some clips. I'll make it quick, I promise. From Trump's victory speech, starting with this.
Under Donald Trump's leadership.
Thank you very much. He's turned out to be a good choice. I took a little heat at the beginning, but he was, I knew the brain was a good one, about as good as it gets.
And again, my job is to be as honest and accurate as possible. And so the DOJ no longer pursuing the classified documents case or the election interference case because of longstanding policy that sitting presidents aren't prosecuted. That affirms every one of Trump's beliefs and every one of his supporters' beliefs about this. But that being the case means we have to work over the next years twice as hard to convince those tens of millions of Americans who didn't go vote this time around, many of them who did in the 2020 election, that it matters enough for them to engage, that people's lives depend on it. And the sad truth is, many of them may engage after harm is inflicted. And of course, I wish we could have just had people believe the warnings instead of having to live the outcome. Then this.
There's no job like this. This is the most important job in the world. Just as I did in my first term, we had a great first term, a great first term. I will govern by a simple motto: promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises.
Trump notoriously kept very few of his promises last time he was president, makes all sorts of declarations and promises and predictions and makes so many statements that end up being wildly incorrect. And then just one more clip, then we'll be done with the victory speech.
And we love the family, and we're going to have a great 4 years, and we're going to turn our country around, make it something very special. It lost that little thing called special. We have to make it so. We're going to make this so great. It's the greatest country and potentially the greatest country in the world by far. And right now, we're going to just work very hard to get all of that back.
Yeah. So even in his victory speech, struggling to deliver it effectively, as you can tell there. So let's go back to this. Given that in the most direct way, instantly, I'm able to see the sign of people wanting to disengage. And across left of center shows, you have mass unsubscribing going on. I appreciate all the people after I mentioned that last with your kind messages of support. But I sympathize totally. I'm struggling myself to discuss all this properly. Because not only do I need to process it as we're all doing, but then figure out how do I then put this into words that meet the moment and that don't mislead you. It's dire. But also give hope where I can, as I always want to do. I think it's hard to find any motivation when there's zero hope. So if you need to take breaks from paying attention, if that starts now, do what is best for you. But remember, in the long term, if all of us who correctly have a pro-democratic stance, all of us who oppose the authoritarianism, and the authoritarian characteristics we see in Trump and the MAGA movement. If all of us who really do want to uplift all Americans and don't seek retribution, all of us who support policies that seek to do that, if we disengage, he wins 2x, right? And if history has taught us anything, it's that even in the face of a very bad situation and very bad leaders, good people can overcome. And I think a really basic foundational sign of who's correct in sort of the big picture things is seeing how all of you and all of the prominent influencers in this space and Democratic politicians are dealing with this Trump victory. Almost unanimously, we're all saying, he won. We accept that. And now we're going to work to oppose his worst impulses, to minimize the worst of what he could do. And next time we have access to voting, next time an election comes around, we're going to send a message. But you're not hearing election denying, even with the crazy Elon Musk actions in Trump's favor, even with the billionaires saying that certain media outlets can't endorse Harris, even with all these things that MAGA would use as justification for claims to undermine the legitimacy of our democratic process, we accept our democratic process worked for the wrong outcome. And we accept that. And today is day one of working towards ultimately overcoming a far from ideal, horrible situation. And then I keep thinking about how we need better media. And it's not going to be us pressuring mainstream media to be better. And so I'm more motivated than ever to build this platform because they failed us. In a world where media gave people the information correctly and accurately and didn't do this artificial neutrality, both sides of nonsense. If just the facts of a situation were properly informed to people, this wouldn't be the result. But we live in a world, as I've said so many times, or in a country where right of center media has gone almost 100% propagandistic for MAGA. Left of center media is subject to all of these really unfortunate errors in the structure of the media. And we're not seeing the responsible reporting that we should at the level that we should. So if it's not going to be us critiquing mainstream media that changes how they do it, then we need to become what is missing. And of course, I'm not just talking about myself, but in this space. And we need to show how you can build a massive set of platforms or collective platform and get information to people on a big level that is pro-democratic and that is pro-decency and pro-truth in a way that's holding ourselves to a higher standard. We can both compete with the influence of a Fox News without descending to the dishonesty of a Fox News. I really do believe it's possible because we're seeing the explosion of content that is much better. But it didn't get to the influence it needed to in time, clearly. So today is day one of a lot of work that's ahead of us. And again, I will not sugarcoat it. This is bad. This is a horrible result. And we'll just take it one day at a time. And go out there and don't stop trying to find joy in life, right? Because that would be giving too much power to Trump and MAGA, right? As much as you can, take breaks, enjoy yourself. And then whenever we refocus and we're discussing politics, we're going to understand the stakes because too many Americans didn't. And as I'm trying to find joy, I find joy in all of you. I find joy in knowing that there are tens of millions of Americans who get it and who are going to work over the coming years to make sure Trump can't do the things that he intends to, and to send a clear message that you're not going to demoralize us. You're not going to make us just sit on our butts and give up. We still care, and we're going to work harder than ever. And next time we have a chance to vote, and even just in our public advocacy, we're going to put pressure such that it's really difficult for Trump to do the worst of his intentions. And that I find joy in. I find joy in all of you. I find joy in the messages I've been getting of people just devastated, but loving, not pointing fingers, not directing the justified rage in the wrong places. And we'll have plenty of time for figuring out what the strategy, what went wrong strategically, what we can do better. But I do find joy in all of you, so thank you for that. But I feel horrible, generally, to be honest, about what we're facing. And at the top of the story, you heard it, but he's getting away with it. He tried a coup. It failed. He waited some time. He blamed pandemic stuff. I mean, all the stuff we talk about. And now the DOJ is giving up. This is, and he is immune from criminal prosecution, the Supreme Court says. It's real. Everything we've been talking about is so real. But thank you for caring enough to subject yourself to the stress that tens of millions of Americans have decided not to when they don't pay attention, and so then they don't vote. They don't pay attention, so some ad that Trump plays saying that Biden's to blame for inflation or Harris, they are swayed by. They don't, and I know people live such busy lives and there's a lot to be considered, but the point is a lot of people don't subject themselves to the stress that you do by caring about this, and that leads to outcomes like what happened. Because I do believe if I think most Americans have the correct basic stances, but most Americans, or too many Americans, don't actually engage, and in this case didn't go vote. We saw that in the numbers. And Trump's fear and hatred actually motivated people more. It's disturbing. So he got more people out to vote, and our more optimistic view of what America could be, it didn't cause the same groundswell. And so you caring and feeling this stress and the deep pain a lot of people are feeling, it all comes from a place of you caring for your fellow American and the country, which is beautiful.